So this is Sarah Lien. Sarah is a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft and has been in IT for 14 years. She also founded the Glasgow Azure user group nearly 3 years ago, aiming to bring people together who are looking to learn and network with peers. Outside of her work, her hobbies include curling, as in the winter sport, not playing with curling irons, running and movies. She's also, a bit of a fun fact, got 6 tattoos, each relating to something important in her life. Sarah will be talking to us today about her continuous learning journey from fighting with server cage nuts in infrastructure through to deploying infrastructure as code using key cloud and DevOps principles. So please put your hands together and welcome Sarah Lien.
Thank you. I know I'm standing in between you guys and lunch, so hopefully I'll not drag on too long. I want to try and share my journey of the career that I've been on in those last 14 years, because it's been a bit of an evolution and I've kind of changed and had various different roles. And I think it's really key to share this journey. I talk to a lot of customers throughout my role at Microsoft, and some of their biggest fears is, how do I transition from being that on-prem person to somebody working in the cloud? So yeah, this is going to be a story of my career. So I started out straight out uni into that kind of traditional first level, second level role. So I was a help desk operator, yeah, so I was that person on the other end of the phone resetting people's passwords on Monday morning when they forgot them, or fighting with printers that weren't working and trying to understand what was actually happening at the other end of that phone for that person. And it was really great base level for me, right? Like, university sets you up for all the fundamentals of IT. You learn how to do different bits about the OSI layer model and stuff like that. But how does that actually translate when you get into the real world, and how do you have to talk to people? And what the kind of first level roles taught me was great listening skills and great communication skills, customer service basically. Because I was on the other end of that phone, so I couldn't see the people, I couldn't see the reaction, I could just hear their voice, I could just hear their words. And often we didn't have the remote connectivity tools back then, so again, I couldn't even see the machine they were in front of them. So I had to learn really good listening skills, and I had to learn how to communicate what I wanted that user to do, because let's face it, they weren't the most technical. So I had to learn how to really communicate properly what I wanted them to do. A lot of it was turning stuff off and turning it back on, right? But it was a really great time. Like I say, I learned a lot of foundational knowledge, and I gained a lot of knowledge myself as well from understanding how products work and how they don't work for those IT people. During that time, I used a variety of technology. Now, this is just some of the ones. I've taken some screenshots. The base operating systems that I learned from were Windows 7, Server 2003, Server 2008. I used Active Directory quite a bit, so I was there resetting those passwords. I was setting up accounts. I was setting up organisational units, things like group policy as well. Exchange was a big thing as well, still is nowadays, right? We all communicate through email. What using some of these technologies taught me at that time was things like naming conventions, and that's things that I've taken throughout my entire career, like what naming conventions work, what don't work, how they work within the organisation for your help desk people all the way up to like third level people, and how they don't, you know, in group policies as well, how to design them and how they can actually hinder end user participation within the IT organisation, right? So I learned a lot of different skills that I maybe didn't recognise at the time, but have built up and I've built throughout the years when I'm now starting to architect solutions, and I'm thinking back, well, these naming conventions work, or these OU structures work, or those kind of things. That kind of base level knowledge I learned throughout that time. I put a picture of a printer up there because whenever I was working in that first level, second level engineer, those printers were the bane of my life, right? Whenever I put on a white t-shirt or a white shirt, that was the day that the toner decided to explode. And I don't know how many shirts I've lost throughout those kind of tasks. But you know, these are things that build character and make us who we are and who I am nowadays. So those were the first 6 years of my job. And mostly those roles were in organisations where IT wasn't the function of the organisation, right? It was just a department, an underfunded, often department within that organisation. But then I started to graduate and move into third level roles, so the third level support roles, or a consultancy role where I was architecting solutions. And this is where I kind of changed. So I was now working with companies that were like managed service providers. So IT was their main objective, their main focus. And that was a really good time because I got to work with different companies. I got to work with a variety of different organisations that had maybe 2 people in them and we provided IT to them, right up into organisations that were like 500, 600 odd people, and we were providing IT for them. But again, all those skills I learned about how to communicate with people and how to design systems that work and not work fed in really well into this time. And again, those customer service skills really worked well because again, I was speaking to different people and I had to learn different names. So I was no longer in this one company where I knew everybody's name or I knew people when I walked by the corridor. I was often speaking to people that I'd never met before, or I didn't know them, but they knew me. So again, those customer service skills come into real play there. And during this time, I kind of learned how to develop systems where I'm not on site. So again, my previous roles, I was always on site with the end users, so systems were designed because the IT was in-house. We weren't in-house. One of our customers, we deployed new IT for them, but then something went wrong. We were actually like 2-hour drive away from them, so we had to rethink. So once we had an issue with them, to get us to that site, that was 2 hours away. So that we had to build in contingency, disaster recovery, because we weren't on site with that customer anymore. So there was things that we were learning doing these kind of roles as well. So that was another 6 years of my life. And most of those kind of 12 years I was spent in data centers like this, right? We've all been there. We've all spent that fun time in the cold aisle where we've had multiple layers on, and then you have to walk around to the hot air and it's roasting, so you have to take off the layers. I've spent weekends sorting out cable management. That's probably maybe not the best picture to be shown. But I've spent weekends, unpicking all of that and doing stuff like that. And again, it isn't glamorous. I've often had to sit in horrible comms rooms where I've had like an upturned bucket as my seat for the day. But these again are character building, and they help you understand how to build and how not to build systems and the kind of issues that you have when you're doing all of that. So hardware was been my focus, for those 12 odd years, whether it be servers or whether it be desktops or laptops. At one point I could probably rhyme off specs for types of servers. I could talk you through BIOSes without being there because that, again, was my focus. But in 2017, that all changed. I was starting to notice that the trend really wasn't in hardware anymore, and people were starting to think about Office 365, Azure, AWS. All of those things were coming into play, and I was starting to look at upskilling or changing my skill set. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried. I was like, how is my skill set going to translate into this new world where everything's cloud and we're not sitting in those data centers anymore? But I took the plunge and I joined a small company in 2017 who had like four or 5 employees total. We had one engineer in the company who was what I call a kind of born in the cloud engineer. He'd come out straight out of university and started working with Office 365 and Azure. He'd never seen a data center. He'd actually never touched Windows Server 2008, so he was a complete polar opposite of what I was. And me, being the traditional kind of infrastructure person, I hadn't really touched Office 365. Well, I had done a few, but I hadn't done masses of work around it, and I hadn't touched Azure. So joining this company was a kind of melding of our 2 different backgrounds, and we were going to work together. So we worked on a various different range of projects. Office 365 was one of them, so that was a big one where people were looking to migrate their Exchange away from that traditional on-premise infrastructure and into the cloud and utilise that. Now, I'm sure you're all aware Office 365 just isn't email migrations or email as functionality. There's lots of collaboration tools and productivity tools in there. So again, I was upskilling on how to use that and how to do that change adoption for these customers as well. So that was one of the main projects that we worked on. Now, another project that came across my desk at this time was the Azure Iot Project. Now, again, I'll be honest, I probably didn't even know what IoT stood for when this project came across my desk, and I was a bit like, what have you just landed me? The sales team had landed this project, and I was like, right, okay, very good. And we set about delivering that. So what it was we had a customer who was measuring temperature within fridges in their company. Now, they had an on-premise solution that wasn't really great. It was often going offline for them, and in order to get the temperature readings, the end users in the company had to phone up the IT. IT had to log a ticket, it had to be checked and all that, and then the information processed back. So it wasn't a great solution, and the company was looking for something that was going to be more reliable and agile and available for the end users to access without having to go through IT all the time. So we designed a solution using IoT devices, and then Azure Stream Analytics, IoT Hub, Cosmos DB, and Power BI. Now, those are probably 4 technologies I'd never touched. I'd probably used Power BI at the time, to interact with reports other people had set up, but I'd never set up a report, never shared it, never done a dashboard, never seen it. And I definitely hadn't touched Cosmos DB, and I definitely hadn't touched Stream Analytics and IoT Hub, right? So again, it was a massive, big challenge for us to do that, but our sales team had sold it, so we had to deliver it, right? So there was lots of documentation reading, lots of sweary words, lots of late nights, lots of broken prototypes. But in the end, we actually did a solution, and it worked for the customer. There was some holes in the delivery, I'll be honest with that, but that was probably a bit of tech limitation, because this was several years ago. And some of our knowledge probably as well. We probably had some gaps in our knowledge, and we didn't know how to work through those things. But what that project taught me was that I could upskill, that I could actually learn these cloud technologies. So although it was scary, and again, I didn't know what any of this actually meant or how to use any of them at the start of the project, but at the end of the project, I had delivered a project from the cloud. So the world of cloud wasn't being scary anymore. I had something that was working, I had a background in it, and I was able to do that. It probably also taught me that this isn't the type of technology that I want to go into. I want to probably stay within that infrastructure boundary and the stuff around that. Some of this technology is pretty cool, and what I see my customers and my colleagues doing with this technology is amazing, but it's maybe not for me. So that was another good thing to come out of the project. Another project that landed on our desk was something that was much more fitting within my skill set. So it was around Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. So we had a customer who we provided backup and DR solutions to. They had an office in the UK, they had one in Dubai and one in Asia. Now their backup solution was all about tapes, and it was a manual process, there was lots of intervention. Their IT only was based in the UK, so they had nobody in Asia and Dubai providing the IT for them. So what happened was they had end users taking those tapes out, taking them home with them, swapping them out. There was obviously a lot of issues with that because people would forget, they would be on holiday. So Monday's backup tape wouldn't come out, and then Tuesday's backup would go on top of it, so they'd have a big hole in their process. Tapes were breaking. There was lots of issues with that solution, and they wanted to look at something different. So we proposed Azure Backup. Now again, at the time, I'd never used Azure Backup, but when I spun it up in a prototype, I recognised that it was based on Data Protection Manager. I think that's what it's called, DPM. And I was like, I know this technology. I know what it is. I can deliver this. And if you've ever delivered a backup solution, you'll know that backup solutions tend to be very similar. And the kind of processes and the things that you think about when you do a backup, regardless of whether it be Veeam or Azure Backup or Commvault or any of those products, are all the same, right? We generally want a backup every night. We want one as a weekly. We want a monthly. We want a yearly. So the process around all of that wasn't any different than what I was previous doing. So again, it was a new product I was using, but again, I could take all the knowledge I'd leveraged in previous years and just apply it there and deliver that solution for the customer. Now we got that working for them. Site recovery was a bit of a challenge. There were some challenges around latency and deployments within Dubai and Asia, which actually ironically would be solved now because we've now got Azure regions in Dubai and better connectivity in Asia. But at the time, there were some issues with that, so we actually never delivered that piece for them. But again, it taught me a lot. It taught me that I could transfer all those skills I'd previously invested in and move them into the cloud as well. And being in this role, I was a mentor and a mentee, because as I mentioned earlier on, I was working with a colleague who'd never touched a lot of the legacy technology. And I say legacy like it's ages ago, but it's still very relevant, right? He'd never used any of that. So when we came across this technology on customer sites, he didn't really know how to interact with it. He actually didn't know how to even get up MSTSC. Yeah, I can type it, I can't say it. He'd never used any of that, so I was teaching him stuff like that, but equally he was teaching me some of the Office 365 and Azure skills that we needed for these customer deployments as well. So we had a kind of good working relationship about being that mentor and that mentee as well. So we both had something to offer each other, regardless of our skill set and where we came from as well. At that time, I was looking to grow my Azure knowledge. I was looking to learn more, speak to colleagues about what we were doing and get more information. But at the time, there was no user group in Scotland, so that's where I founded the Glasgow Azure user group. And it's become a great little hub of community with what we have in Scotland. And it's great for hearing what other people are doing and again sharing. And I've met tons of different people. If you've never been to a user group, please do check out what your local one is. If you check out that site, aks.ms/Azure Family, there's a map where I've put the user groups that I know about in the UK on there, so you can hopefully easily find one that's local to you. And definitely go to one if you've never been, because as I say, I've gained a lot of benefits, both being an organiser and an attendee at these types of events. So after a brief stint with that company and meeting someone at the user group actually, I was given the opportunity to apply for a position at Microsoft as a cloud solution architect. And as you heard from the start, I am a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, so I did land that role. And that was a kind of dream come true, right? Like, I always grew up wanting to work for Bill Gates, and I kind of am right now. So it was a massive turn for me, but it was also a massive learning curve for me. So yes, I had some Azure and Office 365 deployment knowledge, but again, I had to ramp quite quickly up. And there's lots and lots of different things within Azure. Like, I think there's like 400 odd products or 400 odd services that you have to learn, so that's a bit scary, right? But what happened was I basically used the certification path to kind of upskill myself. So I've got the Azure Fundamentals exam, I've got the Azure Administrator exam, and I've also got the Architect exam as well. And I've kind of went through that journey and learned all of those exams in order to ramp up my skills and find out where my holes are and find out where my strengths are. And I'm still in that infrastructure box. You know, I still love all that identity, the security, the governance, you know, deploying subnets, virtual networks, VMs, whatever you have. That's kind of where my sweet spot is and where I enjoy doing stuff. Now I want to talk about something else that we've all probably, that actually freaks out a lot of my customers because they think that they have to do everything by deploying code nowadays. And it's not necessarily true, but it is something that we can't avoid anymore. I learned PowerShell by default a few years ago. If you've ever worked with Exchange 2007, you'll probably be familiar with that the interface was rubbish, right? It wasn't great. And a lot of the stuff and a lot of the tasks that you had to carry out weren't actually in the GUI interface, they were in the PowerShell. So I had to learn it by default. I had to figure that out and I had to put it together. And at the same time, I think round about then, we had Server Core 2008. And my boss at the time was deploying that to our customer sites because he thought it'd be cool to save some CPU and some memory. But again, I had to learn PowerShell to figure out how to deploy these things. So I kind of learned it by default. I know how to do it. I have a bunch of scripts. I've probably got a bunch of scripts up in GitHub as well. I'm not the best and I'm not the most prolific coder in PowerShell, but I can do it. I can read it. I can figure it out. I can use the documentation, and I heavily rely on the documentation and the help built into PowerShell as well. But it's something that I do list on my CV as a technology that I can use. And it's becoming more and more relevant nowadays when we think about deploying things at scale and repeatable, etc. Another thing that I learned, probably by default again, was Azure CLI. So again, I had a PowerShell background. So when I joined that cloud company, the other engineer that I worked for didn't have any PowerShell skills. He preferred Azure CLI. So often we'd challenge each other to try and write a deployment of resources in Azure using PowerShell. So that was my thing. And he would write Azure CLI. And we'd find out what we could and couldn't do within each of those coding languages and then compare notes and share. And often, as I'm sure you'll all have found, some things exist in PowerShell and then some things don't, whereas in Azure CLI, they appear or they don't appear. So we found some holes in the technology, and we found the sweet spot for doing stuff. But again, we shared that code and we learned, and we were able to upskill each other in that. And again, I'm not great at Azure CLI, but I can understand it. I understand where to get it. I understand where the resources are, and I can interact with it if I need to. So ARM templates. Now, this will probably divide the room. Some people will love ARM templates. Some people will absolutely hate them. I'm sitting somewhere in the middle. I see the relevance of them, and it's probably one of those things I need to spend more time doing, and it'll probably get easier, but again, I can do them. I've often went on a customer site and they've said, I'm using ARM templates to deploy the resource and I'm getting an issue. And we have to look through the line of code and we find the missing bracket or the missing comma within them to make them work. So they are frustrating, but again, there's something that we kind of need to learn nowadays, because again, they're a native tool if we're using Azure to deploy it, and there are lots of resources, and it's a kind of common language, if we want to talk about it that way, that's available. Now, there's tons and tons of other languages out there. We've got Puppet here today, there's Chef, there's Chocolatey, there's various different ones, Terraform. I know these three, and I know them kind of well enough, and these are the three that I focus on, and I don't know a lot about the others, but these are the ones that are in my bag as well. What I'd say to you all is don't ignore the coding side of it. I recently caught up with a colleague that I used to work with, and he says he's not touching PowerShell, he doesn't know how to use it, he's not interacting with it, and I was a bit like, why? And he's just frightened of it. He's frightened of learning something new and being caught out that he doesn't know these things. And I think that's the kind of wrong mentality to look at these things. You don't have to be the best person in the room. You just need to understand it and be able to read it a wee bit and be able to interact with it if needed, because you never know what's going to happen with these different technologies. So Azure DevOps is something that when people mentioned when I joined Microsoft, I completely dismissed because I thought it was a developer tool. I thought it wasn't in my bag. I didn't have to understand it. I didn't have to learn it. And it was definitely outside of my comfort zone. But what happened was we have these regular team meetings where we all get together, and sometimes we do presentations, so we do talks like this, and other times we do like hands-on learning, so we have like a workshop, like a hackathon. And one of the events last year was around DevOps. So I was a bit apprehensive about going, because I thought I'm going to be found out. They're going to find out I have no idea how to use this platform, and they're going to bin me and show me the door. But what happened was it was actually a really great learning experience. My colleagues had set it up great, so that even if you had never touched it before, you could learn about it. And I'm very surprised to find out that at the end of the day, I was dying to get home so as I could actually do more of this, because I found it something that I could actually leverage and I can find a use case for it. So the use case that I've actually found is deploying my blog. So I use Azure DevOps to deploy my blog. So all my code sits in Azure DevOps. So I write my code in my blog and blog posts in Visual Studio Code. Again, another tool I didn't think I would ever use because I thought that was a dev tool, but I do have it. And all my code gets pushed up into an Azure DevOps repo, and then I have a pipeline that builds it and deploys it out to a development web slot, and then I check it. I check that I've not broke the code and I'm actually pushing out something that's working, and then it gets pushed to my production slot. Now, this is probably not the best way to do DevOps. DevOps is probably more Abel's thing, and I think he's got a session after lunch on that, but this is how I've used it and how I've learned how to use it. It's all very good learning at these kind of hackathons or workshops, but if you find out a working use case for yourself to learn these technologies, I often find it sits better and I learn more about it that way. I'm still learning. I am still figuring out how to do all these things. I use the repos, the pipelines, and the boards. I haven't really touched the test plans and I haven't touched the artifacts, so I'm still trying to figure out how to do all of that. But again, I'm using this real world life case in my life in order to interact with this technology, and I'm learning about it, and I'm finding it quite a good platform to deploy my blog without breaking stuff. I don't do that right-click publish that we all talk about that we shouldn't do. And again, within my group, I'm kind of being a mentor and I'm being a mentee. So I'm picking on people that know Azure DevOps better than me, and people are finding out that, I wrote a blog post about this, and people are coming to me now to figure out how to do this for their blog or how to learn these technologies as well, because they're traditional infrastructure and they always thought Azure DevOps was a developer tool. So it's really hard to keep up to date. I'll be honest, I've got lots of mails in my inbox and mailbox telling me all the features that are coming out in Azure and all the things that I should be looking at, and it can get a bit of a mess, right? It is hard to try and keep up to date, but there are several resources that I use nowadays in order to keep up to date. So I wanted to share some of those to try and highlight what I use as well. So I talked about the user group, and these are Scottish user groups, but I'm sure there's some local ones. But these are the ones that I kind of attend and keep an eye on. You'll see there's a SQL one up there, there's PowerShell, and there's Office 365. These aren't things that I do in my daily life, but I attend these user groups to meet new peers, to find out what's happening in these different technologies, and just to keep up to date with the different things that are happening. Because I deploy the infrastructure, or I talk about the infrastructure, but then what sits on top of that is probably the SQL, it's probably the database. So I need to understand how these technologies interact with the infrastructure that I'm deploying. So if you haven't been to a user group, check out what's in your local area and definitely go to them, because they're a great resource. Usually you get free pizza, and you'll get free beer, and you'll get free soft drinks, so they're always handy to go to. Twitter is something that I'm heavily using. I actually have installed an app on my phone to stop me using social media because I'm always on it. But these are the hashtags that I use to try and filter out some of the noise within Twitter and find the relevant stuff for me. So the Azure Family one is kind of what it says on the tin. It's all about people that are working in the Azure world and sharing their blog posts, sharing their questions, sharing their knowledge. So I use that one in order to keep up to date with what's happening there. Similar to the SQL one, again, it's not something that I'm natively involved in, but I like to keep on top of that, and there's some cool people within the SQL family that I follow and enjoy keeping up to date with them. The MVP Buzz one is another great one to widen your network. So Microsoft award community leaders and people that are within the community an award called the Microsoft Value Professional Award. So the MVP Buzz hashtag is the one that a lot of them use to share about what they're doing and what events they're doing, etc. So I love to follow that just for variety, because it can't all be about Azure as much as I'd love it to be. The last two, AzOps and IT Ops, are the ones that the Cloud Advocate team at Microsoft use that focus on the IT pros. So again, there's some great content from the team there around that. There's probably hundreds more that I should be following and I'm not following, but those are the ones that I really enjoy following, and if I'm short on time, I focus on to try and get the relevant knowledge as well. So Microsoft Learn, you've probably heard it mentioned a few times today actually. I do really love this platform because it enables me to dip in and out depending on what I want to learn about. I can dip into a wee module if I want to refresh my knowledge, or I can dip in and spend a couple of hours or a day learning a whole track and for building up for my certification. And you can filter it whether you want to learn a technology or whether you actually want to learn about things relating to your job role. So I think we've got ones around like solution architect or project manager or business decision manager or whatever it may be. So you can filter it depending on your needs, and it's free. There's a kind of gamification aspect to it. So I often do tell my customers to kind of implement this if they're trying to learn Azure, right? And what some of them have done is they tell their staff to, look at the modules and have a wee play around and learn some stuff. And then at the end of the week, they get together and see who's got the highest score and they give them a prize. It's kind of a competitive, nice way to kind of enable people to learn and motivate them to do that, right? It's not about being better than your colleague, but it's nice to get that reward that you've invested that time during the week in doing that. So if you've never done it, then maybe try and convince your boss to do something around that, because it's pretty fun to do that as well. So I don't know if anybody has heard of this resource. It's the Azure Heat Map. And it's a product that a colleague, another cloud solution architect, has actually made. It's a website where you can go on and find out what's been updated in Azure recently. When I took this screenshot, the last 7 days, these products that are highlighted were the ones that had updates. So you can click on those, and then it'll take you through to the Azure News, and it'll show you the update and what's happened to that. So it's really great for filtering out, if you've been on holiday for the last 7 days, what's happened, what have I missed out, what do I need to focus on, and if you're heavily into databases, there was lots of database updates that day or that week, so you can read into that and quickly catch up on the technology. Myself and my colleagues often do demos for customers, but then there'll be a long period of time where we don't do a demo. So we tend to check on this to see if there's been any updates, so that if there has, we might need to readjust that demo so that we don't go into a customer site and give them old information. It's not an official resource, but it pulls through from an official site. So if you've not checked it out, please do. And I think actually he's launched a quick quiz on this website as well, so you can quickly find out, test your knowledge as well, just if you're looking to do some of that as well for your certification paths. So in summary, I know I've kind of given you bits of stories, but I want to give you some summary to kind of go away with today. What I've found throughout my journey is what I've learned at the start of it is still very much relevant today. Those customer service skills that I learned on the help desk are still relevant today. I still have to go out to customers, and although a lot of it is face-to-face, I still have to listen to them. I still have to ask the right questions. So it's very similar to that first level role that I had. So don't be frightened about the skill set that you've learned previously. It can still be transferred into the cloud world today. Be open to new opportunities. So when that IoT project slided across my desk, I was a bit like, no, don't want to do that, don't want to do that. And I could easily have walked away and not delivered that, but I didn't. I rolled up my sleeves and got involved. And it showed me a lot. It showed me a lot about who I am and the technology and the knowledge that I have. So be open to those new opportunities. They might be scary, but they can also open up great paths for you in the future. Find something you enjoy and learn it. That IoT project taught me that I could learn stuff, but also taught me that I wasn't really interested, if you want to use that word, in the kind of Cosmos DB or the IoT world, and I was more interested in doing the traditional infrastructure and the things that surround that. So find that thing that you enjoy and focus on that and do that. But don't try and do too much. I've seen people try and be an infrastructure expert, a data expert, an AI expert, an IoT expert, and to be honest, they get overwhelmed and they slightly fail on all those fronts. So pick the thing that you want to be and be that. Believe in yourself. We're probably all our worst critics, right? And we say we can't do something, but believe in yourself. And I think that's what I've learned over the last few years. Even just doing public speaking, I've been doing public speaking for 2 years now, and I need to believe in myself more. I'm always dead nervous at the start, but I need to keep going. I need to believe in myself because you can do it, and I can do these things. So definitely have confidence in yourself. Enjoy it, right? If you don't enjoy it, don't do it, right? I've learned that the hard way. I've made some silly career choices in the past and I ended up doing something I didn't enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to be successful. So whatever you decide to do, please enjoy it and you will be successful at it. My journey's been an evolution because I've been open to those new opportunities. So remember that. Whatever opportunities come your way, take a chance because you never know where they're going to take them. So that's me. I'll be here all day if you've got any questions. That is my Twitter handle. I will be on it probably today. So if you want to ask me questions there, my DMs are open. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed today's talk. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. We've got some time. We've got about 15 minutes before the lunch break. So does anyone have any questions?
So what sort of surprised you the most about making the change from on-prem to cloud? Like what sort of reflection about it or understanding of it did you think you have?
I probably thought it was a lot harder than it was going to be. And I think the biggest thing I realised was like the skill set that I had could be transferred. You know, if you think about Office 365, so I've got lots of Exchange knowledge. Obviously, Office 365 is a ton more tools than that, but that Exchange knowledge still transferred over. You know, how mail flowed in, how mail flowed out. It was still the same. It was just a different. I went to a web GUI instead of that one that was on the server. Active Directory still is relevant, still how we identify, still how we log in. So a lot of that, again, I can transfer over. It is hard trying to do some of the things, but it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. I thought, you know, my career was going to end when the cloud came across, right? Like, but it's not, because I can still transfer a lot of those skills. So I think that's been my biggest reflection.
So making time for learning is something that I've seen be a problem, particularly in operations world. Yep. What does Microsoft do, or what do you do to make sure, or maybe to give you that opportunity to ring-fence time, or what strategies do you have to keep up to date with all these developments?
So my employer is really good about learning. They say to dedicate even just a day doing that. And I know that's not always easy, but what I tend to do is I travel quite a bit, so I either set aside a Monday, and that'll be my catch-up on admin and learning day, or I'll say Friday is going to be my meeting and then learning day, but I book it out in my calendar. So there's that 4-hour chunk or whatever it may be in my calendar where I don't accept other meetings, unless it's like things are on fire and I need to. But I have that chunk of time, you know, and I chunk out lunch. So sometimes I'll be on the Microsoft Learn site while I'm eating my lunch. So it's lunch and learn. But I chunk that out in my diary at the start of the week, and I plan that in, or I book the exam and I force myself to actually find the time to learn. If you don't have that deadline, you'll never get it done, right? So I definitely book out the time in my diary. I haven't done it this week, actually, I think, so I'll need to do that once I get off the stage. But I book out that time, and whether it's an hour, whether it's 4 hours, I book it in my time, and I just make time. I find the time, even if it is an hour after I finish at 5 o'clock, and just sit and do that. And the learning's different, right? Like some days it'll be like Microsoft Learn, other times it'll be videos, or it'll be certification paths, or it'll be an hour on Twitter. And I know that sounds like it's probably a waste of time, but I use those hashtags to find out what blogs people have wrote or what people have shared and learning material, and I learn from other people. There's lots of people out there with great ideas and great interpretations of how to use these services. So I change up how I learn as well, so I do it in different ways, and that's how I kind of stay fresh, and it's not boring, and it's not repetitive, so that's what I do.
Any more questions?
I'm still on the learning front. How long did your certification journey take from the fundamentals to the top end?
I'd probably say about 6 months. And I probably accelerated that because I was not forced, but part of my job last year was to get those certifications. I had to pass them in order to kind of get my bonus at the end of the year type thing. So I accelerated that quite quickly. And I found once you started learning one, the next one came along, and it was easier just to do them all in that one period. If I'd done them broken up, I probably would have had to relearn some of the stuff. Because the exams cover a whole host of things. They cover like data platform, they cover things that I don't touch every day. So I just kept on that rolling cycle, and I did them. And I haven't done an exam since probably the start of the year, so I need to get back on that cycle. But it was probably 6 months to do those courses.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you.